I used to work the night shift at a rehabilitation clinic where the streets were tough and the patients even more so. It was a job that required dedication, and I took pride in being a part of it. The clinic was an old building with creaky floors and flickering lights that created an eerie atmosphere, almost like something out of a horror movie. My main responsibility was to monitor the patients and ensure they didn't cause any trouble. However, trouble always seemed to find us. The patients, in their constant struggle to recover, often became restless and started causing a ruckus, forcing me to intervene and calm them down. It was a demanding job, but I had the skill to handle it. One night, while watching the monitors from my desk, I noticed a man standing outside the door, staring intently at the camera. He was large, with a scruffy beard and a menacing look. I didn't like his presence, but I tried to ignore him, thinking he was some local troublemaker trying to cause problems. However, he didn't move. He continued to watch the camera with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. I decided to use the intercom to offer him help. "Hello, friend. Do you need assistance?" I said, trying to sound friendly. There was no response. He simply kept staring at the camera as if in a trance. Unease began to take over me. I called my colleague Mike to take a look. "What do you think, Mike?" "This guy's been standing there for 20 minutes just watching the camera." Mike looked at the monitor and his expression turned serious. "I don't like this. Let's check it out." We went to the door and the man was still there, motionless. We approached and he showed no reaction. "Hello, friend. Do you need assistance?" Mike repeated, trying to shake him, but to no avail. We tried to move him, but he seemed rooted to the ground. We decided to leave him alone, hoping he would eventually leave. However, he didn't. He continued to watch the camera for hours, as if waiting for something or someone. I felt a growing sense that when what he was waiting for arrived, we would all be in trouble. Finally, after 2 hours, the man vanished without a trace. We searched the area, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had never existed. However, I was sure I had seen him and that he would return. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Just as I was leaving my shift, I saw him again standing outside the door, staring intently at the camera. I knew I was in danger. I ran inside, locked the door, and called the police. When they arrived, he had already left again. I never saw him again, but the feeling of being watched persisted. I knew he would come back for me and wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. I quit that very day. I couldn't bear the paranoia of being constantly watched any longer. However, the image of his eyes fixed on the camera still haunts me, reminding me that sometimes nighttime fears can become very real. I worked for a small security company. It was a quiet job, mostly sitting in empty buildings to ensure everything was in order. My name is Tom, and although I had been in the position for years, there is one night I will never forget. It was a cold October night when I was assigned to watch an old abandoned hospital on the outskirts of the city. The place sent chills down my spine from the first moment. The windows were broken, and the wind howled through the empty corridors. I needed the paycheck, so I accepted the assignment and began my rounds. As the sun set and darkness settled in, a feeling of unease washed over me. I tried to ignore it, reminding myself it was just an old building, but something inside knew there was more. I made my rounds, checking every corner of the hospital to ensure no one had infiltrated. Everything seemed normal until I reached the basement. The air there was thick and musty, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I descended the stairs. The basement was dark, barely lit by the faint glow of my flashlight. As I scanned the area, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding wildly. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the sound repeated closer this time. I knew I had to get out, but my feet felt glued to the ground. I began to back away slowly, my flashlight trembling in my hand. It was then that I saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at me from the shadows. I screamed and tried to run, but something grabbed my ankle, pulling me to the ground with force. I fell, banging my head against the cold concrete. I tried to free myself, kicking and struggling, but it was useless. Whatever had me trapped had too much strength, dragging me further into the darkness. I fought with all my might, but it was like facing a shadow. Just when I thought I couldn't resist any longer, I felt it release its grip, and I quickly got up, running up the stairs and out of the basement. I didn't stop running until I was outside, gasping and covered in sweat. I looked back at the hospital, expecting to see whatever had attacked me chasing after me, but there was nothing. Just the dark silhouette of the building against the night sky. I stumbled to my car, trembling from head to toe. I knew I never wanted to return to that place. I quit the next day, telling my boss I needed a break from security work, but in reality, I was terrified of what lurked in the shadows of that old hospital. To this day, I have nightmares about that night, and every time I close my eyes, I hear that growl echoing in the darkness, reminding me of the horrors that lie just out of sight. Over time, I tried to overcome the fear, avoiding abandoned buildings and dark places. However, the experience left a deep scar, reminding me that some places hold secrets best left unearthed. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still feel a presence watching me, reminding me that some fears never fully disappear. I was in the office until the early hours of the morning working on a crucial project. The clock on the screen read 2:04 a.m. Everyone had left, leaving me alone in the vast office building. The lights buzzed and flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. I tried to concentrate on my work, but the rumors about the building kept nagging at me. They said it was built on an old indigenous cemetery and was haunted. I didn't believe them, but the darkness and silence of the night began to sow doubts in my mind. As I typed on the keyboard, a chill ran down my spine. I thought it was my imagination, but the feeling persisted, making me feel like someone was watching me. I looked around. The cubicles were empty, and all the chairs pushed in. I was alone, trying to regain my focus. The rumors couldn't just be stories. Something in the atmosphere confirmed it. I remembered scenes from horror movies where someone is the last person in the office, facing inexplicable events. Then, I heard a faint creak, like the floor was moving. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but the sound intensified, resembling footsteps echoing down the empty hallway. The unease grew within me. I wanted to leave, but I had a project to finish, so I decided to stay and face the fear. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into total darkness. I froze, my heart pounding wildly. I tried to move, but my legs felt heavy and unstable. I was paralyzed with fear, only able to hear my own breathing. Then a shadowy figure appeared at the door of my cubicle. It was tall and menacing, with bright eyes that pierced the darkness. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The figure slowly moved toward me, its eyes fixed on mine. I closed my eyes, hoping it was a trick of the light, but when I opened them again, the figure was still there, getting closer. I felt an intense cold as the figure reached out a hand toward me. Just as I thought it was going to disappear, it faded into the air and the lights turned back on, leaving the office in silence. Shaking, I packed my things and left the office, swearing never to return. As I walked into the night, the feeling of being watched persisted. I glanced back at the dark windows of the building, half expecting to see the figure watching me. I never told anyone what happened, fearing they would think I was crazy. However, I knew the truth. The building was haunted, and I had faced its evil spirit. Sometimes, on dark nights, I still feel a presence watching me, reminding me that some legends are not just stories. I worked at City Hall a few years ago as a security guard. It was a quiet job, nothing too exciting, until one night everything changed. Part of my duties included patrolling the entire building, including the old jail cells in the basement. Although they hadn't been used in years, it was my responsibility to check them regularly for any intruders. It was probably my second night patrolling alone when things started to get strange. I headed toward the old cells with my flashlight in hand. The hallway was long and narrow, with cells on both sides. The only light came from the hanging ceiling bulbs, casting flickering shadows on the walls. As I walked down the fourth row of cells, the lights suddenly went out. I was plunged into darkness, and my heart began to race. I turned on my flashlight and walked back toward the light switch, making the beam dance across the walls. Just as I was about to flip the switch, the lights flickered again. I thought, this is weird. I wanted to leave, but I knew I had to finish my patrol. I started walking faster, quickly checking each cell as I passed. However, halfway down the hallway, the lights went out again. This time, I heard 2 cell doors slam shut, the sound echoing down the corridor. Without thinking, I ran as fast as I could, the beam of my flashlight bouncing off the walls as I sprinted to the other end of the hallway. I reached the stairs and took them 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. I rushed to the door at the top of the stairs and slammed it shut behind me, leaning against it to catch my breath. I was in the main lobby of City Hall, and although there were people around, I didn't care. I just wanted to get away from those cells. I headed back to my workstation, my hands shaking as I tried to calm down. I called my supervisor and asked if there had been any reported electrical problems. He said no, and I knew I had to tell him what had happened. But as I tried to explain, the words caught in my throat. I was stuck at my post for the next 2 hours, my mind racing with thoughts about what could have caused the strange occurrences. I was paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting something to jump out at me. When my shift finally ended, I left as quickly as I could. I never went back to those cells. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was down there waiting for me. I knew I would never forget the terror I felt that night, running from the darkness and the cells that slammed shut. Since then, I avoided the basement at all costs, taking the long way even if it meant being late for my rounds. When I finally left City Hall, I knew I would never miss that place. However, sometimes, in the darkness of night, I still hear the sound of those cells slamming shut, reminding me that whatever was down there is still waiting for me. Over time, the nights became harder to endure. The sound of the cells closing sometimes seeped into my sleep, waking me up startled in the dark. I tried to rationalize it, attributing it to work stress, but the persistent feeling of being watched never completely went away. I decided to talk to other former City Hall employees to see if they had experienced anything similar. To my surprise, several shared stories of strange occurrences and apparitions in the abandoned cells. Some claimed to have seen shadows moving out of the corner of their eyes. Others heard inexplicable whispers in the empty hallways. Motivated by these testimonies, I joined a paranormal investigation group that decided to explore the City Hall basement. Equipped with cameras, audio recorders, and motion sensors, we ventured into the dark hallway one night. The atmosphere was thick with tension and fear as we moved forward, flashlights illuminating the empty cells. Upon reaching the fourth row of cells, the lights began to flicker again. The same sound of doors slamming shut echoed down the hallway, and a gust of cold air swept through our group. The cameras captured blurry figures moving quickly through the corridors, and the audio recorders picked up indistinct whispers that seemed to come from all directions. It was a terrifying but enlightening experience, confirming that the cells housed a presence that still couldn't rest in peace. This experience made me understand that some places carry stories and energies that transcend our understanding. Although I no longer work in security, I carry with me the lessons of respect and caution toward places with a dark past. The City Hall cells remain a constant reminder that we are not alone and that some stories never end, patiently waiting in the shadows to be remembered.